In 100 yards, turn right onto Dover Road. Turn right onto Dover Road. Continue for 1.5 miles.
Sadly, what we see more toxicity of politics. Good morning, Mr. Dunn.
Morning, Nick. I think the first point I'd say is, well, firstly, I mean, it was awful. It was really, really appalling. But secondly, I think actually, as you said, the problem with this is it's not the first time we've seen these kind of scenes. Whether, as you said, whether it's Labour politicians, Conservative politicians, we all too often at the moment are seeing this kind of toxicity within our politics, and those scenes outside Parliament, which you've witnessed, I've witnessed, we've all witnessed, and it is awful, and it really is appalling. And those who were involved in yesterday's protests, or whatever you want to call it, have no place in our public politics, and nor does any of the language they were using.
And why is it, whether it is Sir Keir Starmer, Michael Gove, whoever, why is it that it's become so toxic, do you imagine, Ben?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of the discourse and debate that happens on social media, online. It's much more divisive, much more toxic than in the mainstream media, the press, and that slowly has begun to bubble under the surface and ended up on our streets. The second is the type of language that is used, which can sometimes become the norm, and that's why we've got the debate about Boris Johnson's words at the moment. But when those words get seen to be the norm, or they get endorsed, it can add to that division and that toxicity. And I think those are the two factors that are contributing to it.
Many Labour MPs and a number of Conservative MPs suggest the Prime Minister needs to withdraw that comment.
In 300 yards, keep right to continue towards Tuns Lane, A355.
Well, firstly, he should withdraw those remarks, and he knows it. The problem with those remarks, taking away the remarks on their own, there is a real problem at the moment that the reason that this this is getting so much attention is that there is a clear division within the cabinet.
Keep right.
You've got Rishi condemning it, Rob endorsing it. I don't know who you've got on your show later today, but Chris will fall on one of those two camps. And so the problem is that everybody knows there's a division in the cabinet. So it means that we're not talking about what really matters, which is tax rises, a slowing economy. Whether, on your question about whether it would stop those protests happening, no, it wouldn't, not on its own. But, if, we expect the best in our politicians, the best in the standards of public life. Those remarks that the Prime Minister made should be retracted, and they've got no place in our public.
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the first exit onto the M4 slip road to London, Heathrow Airport.
Listen to journalist Robert Taylor, who's contributor for the Daily Telegraph. Let's start with that last question, if I can, with you, Robert. Do those comments need to be retracted in your view? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Yes, I do think he needs to retract them. I think he sort of has. He said that he was talking about the organisation that Keir Starmer was running rather than him as a director of public prosecutions. So he sort of retracted them. Does he need to apologise? I think he probably does, quite frankly. Just as we need John McDonnell to apologise for saying that Esther McVeigh should be lynched. We need Angela Rayner to offer a full apology for declaring that the Tories were a bunch of scum, homophobic, racist, misogynistic, absolutely vile banana.
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
Scum. And we need Neil Kinnock to apologise for saying that the overweight Eric Nichols should be encouraged to run the London Marathon because he might die. So, all these are really horrible slurs in politics. They've been happening for years. And yes, we need to get them out of politics. Boris is just the latest, I'm afraid.
Angela Rayner, of course, did apologise for hers, but I say again, people who think that it's fair play to go after these leaders to try and jostle them and harass them, they're not going to be influenced by apologies or withdrawals.
No, they're not. They're not at all. But as your previous speaker said, it doesn't help. It really doesn't help. And if politicians want to end this, they need to set the example at the top.
Continue on M4 for 5 miles.
And so, looking at what the footage that occurred with Sir Keir yesterday, what should Boris Johnson's actions be today in your book, Robert?
I think he's pretty much said already that he got it wrong when he wasn't talking about Keir Starmer personally. He was talking about the organisation. Does he need to go further and apologise? I think he probably should. I don't think he will. But I think that we need to keep this in proportion. Politicians in the past have had stuff thrown at them. John Prescott was punched, assaulted. We've had Jason Rees-Mogg's children targeted by far-left protesters. So what happened yesterday to Keir Starmer, who, by the way, I think dealt with it really well. It was bad, it was nasty, we don't need it, we need to get rid of it. In the great scheme of things, it actually has been worse in the past.
Journalist Robert Taylor, contributor for the Daily Telegraph, thank you for your input on that. So both our contributors there have pointed out the fact that it's not as if this is the first time it happened. Indeed, Robert taking us back to goodness knows how many years when John Prescott decided to punch a protester, I think in a rally, I think as I recall in Wales, and just decided to deck the bloke. So this has been around. Politicians have had eggs and various things thrown at them for some time. So although, of course, I'm not for 1 second condoning it, what he did, let's get in real terms about this. Boris Johnson did not cause that event yesterday. He has already said that the form of retraction, an apology wouldn't hurt, but this is to blame him solely for what we saw is really nonsensical. We'll take your views on that. There are other stories that we need to cover. Sadly, the situation in Ukraine seems to be wrapping up. Talks between Emmanuel Macron and Russian President Vladimir Putin don't appear to, although Putin's saying he's still able to talk, but don't appear to have achieved anything. Meanwhile, the United Kingdom is getting ready to deploy more personnel to Poland. You heard a little of what President Joe Biden says. But back to that summit between Putin and President Macron. Here's Putin speaking after that.
The president preferred to come to Russia to share opinions about what we should do next, and some of his ideas and proposals could form a basis for our further joint steps.
In other news,
a family holiday that turn to tragedy. Now Matthew Selby admits responsibility for his sister's death in North Wales. I'm LBC's Dan Wilson with the latest.
Plus, what action should be taken against West Ham and Premier League star Kurt Zouma after he's filmed a vivid video kicking his cat and slapping his pet cat across the face? A prosecution? We'll look at that in more detail as well. 7:15 LBC News headlines. Simon Conway.
Boris Johnson is facing fresh demands to apologise for his Jimmy Savile smear against Sir Keir Starmer after the Labour leader was surrounded by a mob in Westminster last night. Websites that publish pornography will be legally required to verify the age of their users under new online safety rules. And the Prime Minister says an invasion of Ukraine by Russia would only strengthen NATO. LBC weather mostly dry, bright and very mild in the south, colder in the north, a high of 13 degrees.
LBC travel home to our web. Long delays continue on the M25 clockwise onto the QE2 bridge after the accident. All the lanes are open, but it's still very slow. And also delays on the A13 both ways to the M25 junction as a result. The M3 is slow southbound from the M25 to junction 3 at Lightwater, and this is all down to an accident where 2 of the 4 lanes are closed. Very busy on the A4 eastbound into Chiswick at Sutton Court Road. A lorry's broken down, so 1 lane is closed, and there are delays back onto the M4 elevated section. And in Lewisham, very busy on the Lee High Road, that's the A20 both ways to Belmont Hill, and that's because of the temporary traffic lights, and severe delays on the District, Hammersmith and City and Circle lines.
This is LBC.
When you're in the trades, your tools are your superpowers. So if a supervillain steals them, you won't have time to wait. With Direct Line Tools Essentials, we're on it to help you get your most important tools back in a flash. Well, when we say flash, we mean within 24 hours after a few checks. We solve problems, you save hold-ups on your jobs. Search Direct Line Tools Essentials. We're on it. Direct Line. Tools and business equipment insurance needed. Limit supply up to £1,500.
In 2 miles, at junction 4B, exit towards M3, M23.
Call Nick Ferrari now. 0345 6060 973 LBC.
Turn everyday business purchases into the trip of a lifetime with the British Airways American Express Accelerating Business Card. You'll earn 1.5 Avios for every £1 you spend, and for a limited time you'll receive 45,000 Avios when you spend £5,000 in the first 3 months of card membership. Apply today and check out the world.
Representative 96.7% APR variable. 18 plus UK residents only, subject to approval. Offer valid between 18th of January and 28th of February 2022. Terms apply.
Imagine you in a nice comfy seat, with your hands behind your head, taking in the views, instead of taking on the road, maybe even taking a nap. That's the bliss of getting where you need to go without worrying about driving. Book your train journey via avantiwestcoast.co.uk and we'll take you there. Avanti West Coast. Feel good travel.
It's the TalkTalk Winter Warmer Sale, with deals hotter than a steaming cup of cocoa. Like our super fast, reliable fibre broadband, now from just £22 a month for 24 months. With average speeds from 38 to 145 megabits per second. And award-winning customer experience. Brilliant. Deals that make sense. Search TalkTalk Fibre. Offers end 16th Feb. TalkTalk for everyone. CPI plus 3.7% annual increase from April 2022, subject to availability, £9.95 post and packing, T's and C's apply.
Anyone have to get bin bags?
We've got some!
Well, I better take the dog out. We don't have a dog.
Okay. The Double Big Mac is back at McDonald's.
Right, get the keys.
The Double Big Mac is here for a limited time. Don't miss it. Served after 11 a.m, subject to availability at participating restaurants until the 5th.
In a 1/4 mile, at junction 4B, exit towards M3, M23.
5 butter, lots of sugar, some baking powder, a bit of zest, then cherries, jam, cream, splash here, dash there, whip it, oven it, ta-da! Not a cake. Amounts matter, like how much.
Exit at junction 4B, then keep right at the fork.
It means getting just the right amount of everything, including insurance. Superscript, monthly business insurance shaped around you.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
With the British Airways American Express Accelerating Business Card. Earn Avios while you spend.
7:18 is the time, Kevin. You're going to be the first.
In 2 miles, at junction 4, use the left lane to take the A408 exit to Uxbridge, Heathrow Airport.
We see that other people have been victims of these sort of events. We'll look at that in a moment. It's the front page of the Daily Mirror. Starmer attacked after Johnson's poison after vaxxers set upon Starmer, anti-vaxxers. And it's the front page, excuse me, of the LBC website. Excuse me, tourist demand PM apologises. Cops rescue Starmer from mob. And the front page of the Metro, apologies, the front page of the Metro as well. Keir flees hate mob. Quickly through the remaining front pages, it's the Ukraine, oh no, it's the I as well. I'm so sorry, police rescue Starmer from mob. There we go. It's the front page of the front page of the Times. Britain will not flinch over Ukraine, says the Prime Minister. He has a comment piece in today's Times newspaper, and that pretty much accurately sums up what he says. There's nothing really new or developing there. Boris Johnson also on the front page of the Daily Express, but for different reasons. Rishi is loyal and we're united on problems. That's obviously seeming to present a united front between him and the Chancellor. Front page of the Daily Mail, a licence to clean up the web. The story you've already heard on the LBC News Bulletin. Porn sites will finally be forced to stop children accessing harmful content. You will have to pass verification checks using a credit card or something else to show that you are above the legal age, which is 18. The Daily Telegraph, the North Sea oil fired up amid net zero row. What does that mean? Well, drilling could be approved as Number 10 faces a degree of resistance over those green moves, or I won't say it too often, but of course David Cameron supposedly wants photos that quotes that green crab. And The Sun is the newspaper that has this distressing story, and indeed the video, although obviously on the paper it's a series of still shots of this footballer, West Ham's Kurt Zuma, and he has given an apology, by the way. I'll read you his apology when we do the story in more detail. He's not for a second pretending it's not happened. He effectively drop kicks the cat, smacks the cat across the face, and then hurls designer shoes at the cat. It is believed that the cat had somehow messed up at Zuma's house, and that's why he was so enraged. But it's absolutely appalling way to treat any animal, let alone a fairly defenceless cat. More on that later. Okay, let's talk about Boris Johnson's comments concerning Keir Starmer and whether that provoked what we saw yesterday. Kevin's in Hampstead. Did it, Kevin? Good morning.
No, Nick, it was a storm in a teacup. It was a handful. It wasn't thousands of crowds of people. It was a handful of anarchists. Allegedly, Jeremy Corbyn's brothers allegedly.
I don't think he was involved in the heckling, by the way. He had been there earlier, just to clarify.
Possibly, exactly. Allegedly, it's caused good route to go down. Now, it's a handful of anarchists just trying to cause political unrest between the parties. There was shouts of traitor. I mean, I don't know what that's about. Traitor. There was a couple of shouts of Savile. I just hope it seems to be turning into a witch hunt, Nick, and I think the British public can see through this. And I think it just strengthens Boris's...
In 300 yards, at junction 4, use the left lane to take the A408 exit to Uxbridge, Heathrow Airport.
Boris Johnson's current position. Why? Yeah, why do you think it does that?
Well, because I think the public can see between the lines that it's just a witch hunt, I mean, what are they? I mean, I'm wondering what they're going to drag down next,
Use the left lane to exit at junction 4, then use the middle lane to keep right.
This would not have happened without him suggesting that Keir Starmer didn't prosecute Jimmy Savile when he could have done. Had the Prime Minister...
If it was 500,000 people on the streets, Nick, I'd be inclined to agree with you, but it was a handful of anarchists and shouting traitor. Well, I don't quite know what.
Use the middle lane to keep right. In 1.5 miles, at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
As well. Kevin, thank you for getting us started. Chris, you'll be the next caller, but we must update you on the situation in Ukraine. I mentioned that the Prime Minister has an article in one of the papers, The Times. He warns President Putin that invading Ukraine would strengthen NATO. This as the Prime Minister readies to deploy Royal Marines, RAF Typhoons, Royal Navy warships to Eastern Europe. It's believed that British military forces will now be deployed in Poland, where Ben Wallace was visiting yesterday, and he said what lay behind his trip to the country.
Where there is real anxiousness about the activity of Russia towards Ukraine on Europe's eastern borders, and real worry about the continued military build-up of forces both in Belarus and indeed Russia near Ukraine. It is absolutely right that two of Europe's closest allies meet to discuss what we could do to deter Russia and any further steps being taken, and indeed what we would do if Russia were to make the foolish mistake of invading a sovereign country that has expressed through its own free will a desire to not only be part of NATO but also to do things its way.
The attempts at diplomacy go on. French President Emmanuel Macron went to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin. There is the most extraordinary picture in, I think, all of your newspapers. It happens to be on the front page of the Financial Times. The table that is between the two men. I've worked it out. I mean, if you allow that he's about 6, I would suggest it's 60 to 70 foot long table, and there's one sat at either end. So it's like the sketches you see with a sort of banqueting hall. They would have had to shout to be heard. It's roughly the length of a double-decker bus. Hell of a table. So I don't know that they're close to achieving anything. Dan Saber is Defence and Security Editor at The Guardian. Fortunately, the diplomacy goes on, but Dan, without any results so far. Morning to you.
Good morning, Nick. No results so far. I mean, yeah, the big news you've already referred to is Emmanuel Macron, France's president, spent 5 hours in talks with Vladimir Putin yesterday. So, yeah, that's clearly a long and serious discussion. Although I think there was some nice Chardonnay and all the rest there who did it, because, you know, got a fine wine with your diplomacy, haven't you?
You do.
But I think there was quite a bit. There was actually some concern about what the French president was up to, because was he sort of almost trying to sort of find some sort of common ground and bargain away Ukraine in some way? And the obvious area, really, for where there might be a chance of compromise would be to say that Ukraine won't be allowed to join NATO, that's never going to happen. And actually, Macron used an interesting word while he was out there in Russia. He talked to reporters about Finlandization. What does that mean? Well, Finland's not a member of NATO, never has been, member of the EU, of course, but it's always a sort of agreed, you know, the understanding has always been that Finland would be militarily neutral. It would act as a buffer between Russia and NATO, and so, you know, Ukraine could do that. That would be the suggestion that Macron put on the table. Not that the Ukrainians were there, by the way. He goes off to Kiev today. So that might be a problem. And of course, well, you know, when you live next to Russia in the way that Ukraine does, you might have a rather different idea about your security arrangements. You know, until now they've been rather keen to join, for obvious reasons, I think.
I see.
All those troops massed on the border.
And so what do you see happening next? Just more talks between more leaders, Dan?
I think it's going to be pretty hot for the next couple of weeks, and I don't think at the moment Russia's got any incentive to stand things down. So they've got, you know, the number of troops on Ukraine's borders continues to grow. We were talking about 100,000 a couple of weeks ago. Now we're talking about 135,000, something like that, and it's beginning to go up. The kind of number that people think about for an invasion might be as much as 175,000, but the US President Joe Biden said they've already got a force that might be able to mount an attack on Kiev. So, you know, there's no hard and fast rule here. The crucial thing is the weather as well.
Yeah.
This time of year, the ground freezes over, in the marshes to the north of Kiev. And the other thing that Putin's done is he's done a deal with Belarus, who's increasingly sort of enfeebled Western neighbour, and there are now these military exercises, joint exercises, Russian troops and Belarusian troops. Belarus, of course, is to the north of Ukraine, and if you were really bent on invasion and you wanted to capture Kiev, Ukraine's capital, Belarus is the way you would go.
Dan Saber, thank you for all the background. Defence and Security Editor at The Guardian. We'll obviously update you with that story as and when anything breaks in these round of talks as various world leaders and others go to different places. 7:28. We'll come back, though, to the UK and indeed to London and to the House of Commons and those ugly scenes involving Sir Keir Starmer. Chris in Richmond. Chris, what do you want to tell me? Good morning.
Morning. This is appalling, isn't it? I mean,
yes,
Boris Johnson is literally taking a leaf out of the Trump playbook. I mean, he knows damn well it's not true. Tory MP after Tory MP, Gillian Smith, Roger Gale, at least I think one other, Tobias Edwards, all have condemned him for it. But the Speaker of the House of Commons hasn't actually told them to apologise. I mean, what planet are we living on, Nick, when this is allowed to happen?
Well, hold on. What planet were we living on last October when Michael Gove was the victim of this as well? And when Angela Rayner derided... It's horrible on both sides. Angela Rayner derided them as Tory scum, and Jacob Rees-Mogg's children were heckled.
I agree. I completely agree. And even at the time, if you remember, Keir Starmer said that he would not have used the words that Angela Rayner used.
Right.
Johnson has not apologized. That was unacceptable, and no one disputes that. But I think that's a bit of whataboutery there, Nick.
Well, no, hold on. You can't... Hold on. If the mud is being slung on all sides, it's perfectly valid for me to bring that into the conversation. I mean, Ian Duncan Smith was struck on the head with a traffic cone in Manchester. His crime? He's a Conservative politician.
Well, of course it's unacceptable.
Right, so don't put it all... I'm not defending Johnson, but you can't lay it all at Johnson's door. This toxicity is abroad on all sides.
Well, I agree, but by making those comments, Nick, you're downplaying the seriousness of
I'm
the fact
not.
that he has made it's a false allegation. It's a completely false allegation, is it not? Or are you claiming it is a...
No, it would have... Well, in as much as he issued an apology, but no, to lay it personally at Sakir, no, no, of course you can't do that, and that has been well proven. But this idea that it's all... Sadly, this level of anger or simmering dissent has been around for some time. Chris, I always enjoy speaking with you. We've got to go to the news, but before we go to the news, this important story, court case developing in Wales. Let's go to LBC, straight to LBC's Daniel Wilson.
Nick, this has been a deeply painful 6 months for a family that was ripped apart last year by what was a casual summer holiday to North Wales that quickly turned to tragedy. Amanda Selby, who was 15, described by many as a loving and caring granddaughter and a big part of the community that she grew up in Greater Manchester. Her life tragically cut short on that holiday to Teamower Caravan Park near Abergele. The criminal involved her brother, 19-year-old Matthew Selby, who was arrested on that holiday park when police were called at the end of July last year. Coroner confirming that Amanda's cause of death was asphyxia. Now, Matthew Selby was initially charged with murder, which he denied at a plea hearing in November. The teenager had been due to stand trial this month, but subsequent psychiatric reports carried out on Selby led the CPS to accept a charge instead of manslaughter by diminished responsibility. He appeared at Mould Crown Court yesterday via video link from HMP Bedouin in what was a relatively short hearing. Selby appearing in simply a grey tracksuit in which he showed little emotion, where he pleaded guilty to that manslaughter charge. His defence team stressed that Selby would be seen again by a psychiatrist before sentencing, which is due to take place on Friday, the 18th of March.
Daniel Wilson reporting back to our conversation about that attack, that a verbal attack on Sir Keir Starmer after this. 7:31, you're listening to Breakfast with me, Nick Ferrari, here on LBC. The news is read by Simon Conway.
Several Tory MPs are demanding the Prime Minister apologises after police had to protect Sir Keir Starmer when he was accosted by a mob of protesters. They were shouting about Jimmy Savile following Boris Johnson's false claim that the Labour leader failed to prosecute the serial sex abuser in his previous job. BP has reported annual profits of £9.5 billion. The results follow calls for a windfall tax on energy giants as the cost of living crisis deepens. Adult websites will be legally required to verify the age of their users. The government says it's strengthening the draft online safety bill to protect children from pornography. LBC weather, mostly dry, bright and very mild in the south. Cloudy with outbreaks of rain across central areas. Colder with sunny spells and blustery showers in the north, and a high of 13 degrees.
LBC.
You're free to LBC. What would you like to say?
Hi there, long-time listener. First time I called in. Well, it's about time. It is about time. You touched on a touchy subject there.
Your story, Dean. Good morning.
The only thing for me to do is turn off all my heating.
Right, let's go to your calls.
I've never run a radio station before, but I'm so motivated to ring you this evening.
Presumably food as well is starting to look more pricier, is it?
Sometimes you walk into a supermarket, walk around and walk out.
The contempt with which this government holds the people of the UK.
LBC listeners, I take your calls. And what I say, I want to say to you.
Compared to 12 months ago, how much worse are things now?
There are evenings where I don't eat.
All I have is my radio and LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
How much will your retirement cost? Can your savings extend to meet inflation, or will your retirement bubble burst before you even get there? For tips on your retirement investments, get your copy of Fisher Investments UK's definitive guide to retirement income and ongoing insights. Search Fisher Investment Guide. Investing in financial markets involves the risk of loss, and there is no guarantee that all or any capital invested will be repaid. Past performance neither guarantees nor reliably indicates future performance. Fisher Investments Europe Limited, trading as Fisher Investments UK, is authorised and regulated by the UK Financial Conduct Authority.
Did you feel that bump? That slow puncture in your tire that could almost go unnoticed. But when you've been safety perfectionists as long as we have, you know that the little problems don't always stay little. If you have a puncture in your tire or a chip in your windscreen, bring it to your local Volvo retailer, and if it can be repaired, we'll repair it for free. Because we care a lot. even about the little things.
Volvo vehicles only. Repairs carried out according to Volvo safety standards. Chargeable replacement available if required. Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at volvocars.co.uk.
It's estimated that 1 in 10 children will experience sexual abuse before they turn 16. That's equivalent to 3 in every classroom.
In 300 yards at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
Look out for. Has your child become more withdrawn or started acting differently? They could be trying to tell you something's wrong. To learn more about the signs and find further support, visit stopabusetogethor.campaign.
Exit at junction 3.
For a limited time, you can save 20% in selected British Gas home care cover. The same cover that...
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the 4th exit onto the Parkway, A312.
Boiler will get it sorted without any surprise repair bills. Bring it on, winter. Don't miss out. 20% off ends 21st of February. Search British Gas Home Care. Terms, exclusions and geographical restrictions apply. 20% discount for first 12 months. 5-star rating is for home care 3 and 4. New customers only.
This is the sound of mechanic Terry making tax digital with Sage. Receipts snapped. Invoices sent. VAT sorted. Be ready to boss making tax digital. Get the financial tools you need at sage.com.
At Lidl this Valentine's Day, we're big on saying it with flowers. With a single red rose, just 99p. A dozen from $4.99. Or if we're really pushing the boat out, 100 red roses for $24.99. This and more in Lidl stores from the 11th of February. Now that's big on quality. And always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes NI.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
With the British Airways American Express Accelerating Business Card. Check out the world.
7:36 into the world of business and finance. Danny Houston, financial analyst at AJ Bell, joins me now. And it's fair to say the energy sector attracting a lot of attention, but one giant oil company doing rather well, Danny, BP. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. We've had in the last 40 minutes the latest profit results from BP, and it's fair to say it's making a lot of people quite angry. They made $4 billion in the last 3 months of the year, which takes...
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway.
$4 billion. And of course, this comes at a time when so many of us are struggling with our energy bills. And in fact, with the price cap going up, that's going to
continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
Around £15 billion extra a year. So of course, there have been lots of calls about what can be done, whether there should be a windfall tax, but that of course raises an awful lot of questions about precedent and whether it's the right use for the money.
Similar sort of money for Shell the other week, wasn't it? They made vast amounts of profits as well, as I recall.
Yes, they did. Their profits were absolutely incredible just for the quarter. You're talking about the same amount that BP made for the year. And it's the same, of course, with the big oil and gas giants in the United States as well. But when you look at how much a barrel of oil has gone up by, you know, when we weren't using our car in lockdown, you're talking about $40 a barrel. Now it's over $90 a barrel. And of course, gas prices, we know how they've risen.
Yeah, I think we'll take a look at this later in the show. Thanks for giving us all the background. Let's move to other stories. And on the move, a new chief executive for Taylor Wimpey.
Yeah, Jenny Daly, she's been with the company since 2014, so, you know, clearly she knows the business inside and out. She becomes the 9th female CEO of a FTSE 100 company. But the big thing that is going on behind the scenes is that Elliott, an activist investor, very well known in investing circles, had been pushing for fresh blood, said that the management that was there had underperformed, and of course Jenny Daly is part of that management. But clearly the board are very much behind her. She's got a huge amount of experience, and the share price, well, it does suggest that investors are prepared to give her a chance.
Lastly, did you get all your Christmas cards at Christmas, Danny, or were some late in arriving?
I have to say I didn't send any Christmas cards, and I think I only got 2, but I know a lot of people had Christmas cards coming in January, which was just crazy really when you think about it. Do you send Christmas cards still?
I do, because I'm very old. I even write letters to people. I don't know if you've ever heard of these things. You get a piece of paper and you get a pen. This is before email. No, so if anybody, in the unlikely event everybody takes me to dinner or something, I always send a note, a little handwritten note to say thank you in return. But I seem to be one of the few people who's using the post office, and those who did at Christmas had a pretty bad time. They're in trouble now, the Royal Mail, aren't they?
They are in trouble, yeah. They're having to do a major restructuring in order to deal with the situation. They have let go 700 management people. The share price has fallen. And what's interesting is that there was a video put out by Terry from the Commercial Workers Union, and he told staff, look, you know, the quality of service has been unacceptable. It needs to change. But it's quite fascinating because he's trying to get really to the root of what is going on. And we know that the boss of the business did say in December that they didn't have enough vans to deliver all the presents. Now, we know obviously Omicron had a massive effect. 77 offices said that they had delays due to sickness in December. 15,000 employees were off sick. But you know, this is a business that has been all about transformation, and it's clear at Christmas it just didn't deliver on those promises.
Danny, we'll talk around this time tomorrow morning. Thanks for your report. Danny Houston's with AJ Bell.
LBC Business Update.
With Direct Line Landlord Insurance. For tailored landlord insurance, come direct.
In a quarter of a mile, at Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit and stay on the Parkway, A312.
Had to cancel due to contracting COVID. LBC can now reveal just 3 days before the trip. She held a party for one of her cabinet colleagues. Where was the party? Who was the colleague? LBC's political editor Theo Archwood has this exclusive report. Theo.
To give you the background, the Foreign Secretary's trip to Ukraine last week was supposed to be her chance to stand tall on the world stage, to show strength as Russian President Vladimir Putin threatens to launch a military invasion across Ukraine's eastern border. But within a matter of hours before Liz Truss was due to fly out, she cancelled that trip after testing positive for COVID-19 and announcing she'd be self-isolating at home. Now LBC can reveal that the Saturday before, Liz Truss held a...
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway. Continue on A312 for 1.5 miles.
Evening is, of course, the Foreign Secretary's grace and favour residence in Kent that she shares with the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab. But sources tell me that also at the event were a number of special advisors and former special advisors. The implication that this was an opportunity to get away from London and plot her bid to be Prime Minister. Although no rules were broken, it doesn't also reflect well on the Foreign Secretary for a number of other reasons. This party happened on January the 29th, the Saturday evening. 2 days later, on the Monday of last week, Sue Gray published her redacted report into the Downing Street parties. As one senior Tory put it to me, and I'm quoting here, so arrogant, so tone-deaf, so stupid. Miss Truss is now due to fly out to Moscow on Thursday to meet her counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, for talks. It is the first visit by a Foreign Secretary to the Russian capital in 4 years, but those I've spoken to tell me that in their view, this episode shows that she's more interested in a photo opportunity and would be, again quoting, a disaster as Prime Minister. Just a final note, we understand one official who attended this event, this party, also tested for positive for COVID immediately afterwards. The Foreign Secretary's team, and I've spoken to them, don't comment on private events.
Theo Archwood, LBC's political editor, with that exclusive reports. Thanks, Theo. Great work. We'll see how that develops through the day. Let's come back to the other political story which developed last night. Sir Keir Starmer being cackled. Peter in Guildford, thank you for hanging on the line. Your reaction, Peter. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. I just really wanted to close the previous caller, who obviously did make a small mention between the similarities of Donald Trump and Boris Johnson. I do actually think this is really important, and it isn't discussed enough in politics, because we know how history has played through with Donald Trump, and I feel, and it really concerns me, that this is what is being played through in British politics, and how destructive.
What are the similarities as you see them?
So I hate to state personal circumstances, but I think if you look at Boris Johnson and the way that he behaves and the history of his behaviour and his personal circumstances, I think that's one example. I think if you actually look at how his political career has taken off, for being London Mayor, and the lies that have been built up throughout the years.
But Donald Trump had never held any other office. That similarity doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't, but he was a businessman, and people, and I think this is one of the big points here, people knew when they voted in for Donald Trump what kind of character he was. And I think what's really disturbing is it feels like people are stating that Boris Johnson, they knew and know what his character is, and therefore or makes it harder for him to be taken out of power.
Peter, thank you. Doing the similarities likely between the two men. I'm grateful for your input. Ahmed in Streatham. Your view, Ahmed. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me, Nick?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
So the thing is, as I said to before I called in, language is very important, and the words you use is very important, and that language, when it's not used appropriately, can create these, people who think that any sort of violence, whether it's verbal or physical, is acceptable.
Yeah, I know.
Even though he hasn't. Like, I mean, if the
They
police
were also chanting about vaccines as well. They were anti-vax. So
In 300 yards, turn right onto Roslyn Avenue.
The thing is, you're probably aware what happened to the late MP who died,
well, that's the subject that's going before the court. So certainly we can say that a level of violence has come about, but we can't say anything more about that, Ahmed. So just generally, what do you?
Turn right onto Roslyn Avenue, then you will arrive at your destination.
And the thing is that Boris Johnson has, consistently through a time again and again, had said things that are, created tension.
But so have both sides, of course.
But I understand it's both sides. But if you look at individuals who are in a position of power, position of influence, they need to be very careful what words they use.
I think we all agree on that. Ahmed, thank you. More reaction coming on that. Coming up